cultures are so different, it makes people look at us, right? We could be, and I've said this many times, is that we, as British and black people, we are always going by what white Europeans want us to do. We are quiet, we are humble, we are doing the jobs, we are literally assimilating. We are one of the biggest cultures, the first cultures to assimilate to European nature. And still they come at us. They still come at us, right? We were told to straighten our hair, to wear wigs, to be as white as possible, and they still came at us because why? We still had our own food. We still had our cultures in our own homes, by the way. They couldn't be out and about only until Notting Hill riots, 1958, were we allowed to be a bit more black. Because guess why? It was because a black man was unalived in the street because he went out with a white woman, and that was when Notting Hill Carnival and actually blackness became a little bit more part of British culture. So it was a little bit more there. And Buzzer, I'm just going to correct you in the comment section, Buzzer. I'm not in Dubai, I'm not in the UAE, so I'm just going to say that I'm not there.
I will just
carry on. Yes.
I'll finish up here, but I would just say this, like, I always encourage people, to, like, right, take away your politics for us, and not anybody in here, because I'm with it, yeah, but right, so when you are looking historically, I'm talking to the audience, when you look historically and stuff like that, and if you can
check.
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 Encourage people, to, like, right, take away your politics for us, not anybody.
Check.
I'm with it, yeah. But right, so when you are looking historically, I'm talking to the audience. When you look historically and stuff like that, and if you can check.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Today is June 15th, 2026, exactly 11:30 a.m. where I'm at right now. And we are continuing our 22nd book, even though it's more like 3 books in one. Our 22nd book in our Book to React series. This is Leon Trotsky's The History of the Russian Revolution. Where we are now, we are in the early stages, I think about 2 or 3 chapters in to volume 2, where we will be reading chapter 27, The Counterrevolution Lifts Its Head. In the past few chapters, Trotsky has been talking about the counter-revolution, the bourgeoisie fighting back against the revolution that the Soviets are waging in Russia. It's been a very interesting read so far. I'm enjoying diving into this book so much. I suggest everybody go check out the post I put on my channel showing the different characters, political parties, events, and terms that Trotsky is using in this text that might have flown over some people's heads, or because we've been reading so much and for so long, they might have forgot. Even me. I just needed some clarity on a few things, so that's why I went to the appendix part of the book and posted up what I posted in the on my community tab. So I suggest everybody go check out the community tab if you want to find out about all the characters, such as Milikov, Kerensky, who the Kadets were, what is a Menshevik, what is a Bolshevik. I don't want to make this text inaccessible to people. I want the text to be very accessible, understandable, and fun for everybody who has been following along. So go check out the post and also watch the previous episodes so you're caught up on the story, and that's all I gotta say. Without further ado, let's get to it. The Counter-Revolution Lifts Its Head. I have both live streams going right now, horizontal and vertical. Looking forward to the commentary from anybody who's going to jump in. Please make sure you read the pinned post comment. Please make sure you read the pinned post comment, because the threat is absolutely real. I will make sure that white supremacists, racists, fascists all get banned. Anybody coming here trolling, talking about something else, you will get banned. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, we're just gonna hold it down. I got about 2 hours until I have to go. I have to go to work later today. So yeah, let's get to it. So chapter 27, The Counter-Revolution Lifts Its Head. During the first 2 months, when the power belonged formally to the government of Guchkov and Milikov, it was, as a fact, wholly in the hands of the Soviet. During the following 2 months, the Soviet grew weaker. A part of its influence upon the masses went over to the Bolsheviks. A part of its power the minister socialists took with them into their portfolios in the coalition government. From the outset of preparations for the offensive, there began an automatic increase in the influence of the commanding staff, the organs of finance, capital, and the cadet party. Before shedding the bloodshed of the soldiers, the executive committee carried out a substantial transfusion of its own blood into the arteries of the bourgeoisie. Behind the scenes, the threads of all this were held in the hands of the embassies and governments of the Entente. All right, shout out to OG Kicks up in the live stream. All right, we have to send some trolls out of here. All trolls got to go. Okay, and let's see, this guy's got to go as well. All right, so we're kicking people out already. So we're starting off strong. Okay, Brandon Reed, he's going to the re-education camp. All right, all the other people here, make sure you read the pinned comment. So continuing here. At an inter-allied conference in London, the Western friends forgot to invite the Russian ambassador. Only after he had reminded them of his existence did they send him an invitation. It was about 10 minutes before the opening of the session, and moreover, there was no place for him at the table, and he had to crowd in between the Frenchmen. This mockery of the ambassador of the provisional government and the demonstrative exit of the cadets from the government, both events happening on the 2nd of July, have the same purpose: to bring the compromisers to their knees. The armed demonstration bursting out just after this had an especially exasperating effect upon the Soviet leaders, because having been struck this double blow, they were now at the time directing all their attention in exactly the other direction. Once it had become necessary to take up a bloody task in alliance with the Entente, it would be hard, after all, to find better intermediaries than the cadets. Tchaikovsky, one of the oldest revolutionists, had become metamorphosed after those long years abroad into a moderate British liberal, moralized as follows: money is necessary for war, and the Allies will not give money to socialists. The compromisers were embarrassed by this argument, but fully understood the force of it. So once again, what I find very interesting about Trotsky's text is that it is a direct attack on liberalism, something that we should be taking into account right now. I know a lot of us right now on the political left, especially in America, are very frustrated with the Democrats, but also rightfully scared of the fascists who exist in the Republican Party. But in Trotsky's time, who they were fighting against was not a right-wing fascistic government similar to a Trump administration or a Bush administration or a Reagan administration. They were fighting against the equivalent of Bill Clinton. They were fighting against the equivalent of Barack Obama. They were fighting against those types of people. Liberals who want to maintain a bourgeois republic, an established order that makes sure rich people and capital owners remain on top. So this is something that we have to keep in mind as we continue to read about Trotsky fighting against the cadets, fighting against Kerensky, Milikov, these types of people. Picture in your mind, whenever they say Kerensky or Milikov, think of Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer. Think of Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama. Think of those types of people, okay? Anyway, continuing here. The correlation of forces had obviously changed to the disadvantage of the people, but nobody was able to say how much. The appetites of the bourgeoisie, at least, had grown considerably more than their opportunities. In this uncertainty lay the source of the conflict, for the strength of class forces is tested in action, and all the events of a revolution reduce themselves to these repeated trials of force. However great may have been the shift of power from left to right, in any case, it very little affected the provisional government, which remained a vacant space. The people who in those critical July days were interested in the ministry of Prince Lvov could be counted on the fingers of one hand. General Krymov, the same one who once had a conversation with Guchkov about overthrowing Nicholas II, "We will soon meet this general for the last time," sent the prince a telegram concluding with the urgent demand: "It is time to pass from words to deeds." The advice sounded funny and merely further emphasized the impotence of the government. At the beginning of July, subsequently wrote the liberal Nabokov, there was one short moment when the authority of the government seemed again to lift its head. That was after putting down of the first Bolshevik uprising. But the provisional government was unable to make use of this opportunity and let slip the favorable conditions of the moment. It was never repeated. Other representatives of the right camp have expressed themselves to the same effect. In reality, in the July days, as in all other critical moments, the constituent parts of the coalition were pursuing different goals. The compromisers would have been perfectly ready to permit a final wiping out of the Bolsheviks, had it not been obvious that after settling with the Bolsheviks, the officers, Cossacks, Cavaliers of St. George, and shock battalions would have cleaned up the compromisers themselves. The Kadets wanted to carry through and sweep away not only the Bolsheviks, but the Soviets also. However, it was no accident that at all acute moments the Kadets found themselves outside the government. In the last analysis, what pushed them out was the pressure of the masses, irresistible in spite of the buffer provided by the compromisers. Even if they had succeeded in seizing the power, the liberals could not have held it. Subsequent events conclusively prove this. The idea of a lost opportunity in July is a retrospective illusion. At any rate, the July victory did not strengthen the government, but on the contrary, opened a prolonged period of crisis, which was formally resolved only on the 24th of July, and was in essence an introduction to the 4 months death agony of the February regime. So what Trotsky is saying here is essentially the liberal government was becoming repressive against the Bolsheviks, trying to cling to power in any way. But the liberals were not able to hold on power. They were losing legitimacy, even if they wanted to stay in the war. Other people, other members of the Allied forces were looking at Russia like, backwards cousins that couldn't get anything right. They had a revolution in February where the government was overthrown, and now there's two sort of parallel governments, and the liberals are doing everything to be taken seriously. But they can't be. The liberals were unable to hold on to power. And Trotsky and the Bolsheviks are saying here that, this lashing out is just the last sort of methods that the liberals could use before eventually collapsing. Continuing here. The compromisers were torn between the necessity of reviving their half-friendship with the bourgeoisie and the need of softening the hostility of the masses. Tacking became for them a form of existence. Their zigzags became a feverish tossing to and fro, but the fundamental line kept swinging sharply to the right. On the 7th of July, a whole series of repressive measures was decreed by the government, but at the same session, and so to speak by stealth, taking advantage of the absence of the old man, that is, the Kadets, the minister socialists proposed to the government that it undertake to carry out the program of the June Congress of the Soviets. This, however, straightaway led to a further disintegration of the government. The great landlord and former president of the land union, Prince Lvov, accused the government of undermining, with its agrarian policy, the popular sense of right. The landlords were worried not only lest they be deprived of their hereditary possessions, but lest the compromisers attempt to place the Constituent Assembly before the fact of a decision already arrived at. All the pillars of the monarchist reaction now became flaming partisans of pure democracy. The government decided that Kerensky should occupy the position of minister-president, retaining also the portfolios of war and navy. To Censorelli, as the new Minister of the Interior, fell the task of responding in the Executive Committee to questions about the arrest of the Bolsheviks. A protesting question was raised by Martov, and Censorelli unceremoniously answered his old party comrade that he would rather deal with Lenin than Martov. With the former, he knew what to do, but with the latter, his hands were tied. I take upon myself the responsibility of these arrests. The minister threw this challenge into the tensely attentive hall. Okay? All right. So Ben Blunt says, F all Zion Nazi doctrinaires socialism, communism, and there was no liberalism in Russia. Oh yeah, you got to go. You got to go. Get the hell out of here. You got to get out of here. Get out of here. All right, continuing here. In dealing blows to the left, the compromisers would justify themselves by citing a danger to the right. Russia is threatened with a military dictatorship, declared Dan at the session of July 9th. We are obliged to snatch the bayonet from the hand of the military dictator, and this we can do only by declaring the provisional government a committee of public safety. We must give it unlimited powers so that it may root out the bottom anarchy on the left and counter-revolution on the right. As though in the hands of a government fighting against workers and soldiers and peasants, there could be any other bayonet but the bayonet of counter-revolution. By 253 votes with 47 abstaining, the joint session adopted the following resolutions. 1. The country and the revolution are in danger. 2. The provisional government is a government of the salvation of the revolution. 3. It is endowed with unlimited powers. The resolution resounded as loud as an empty barrel. The Bolsheviks present at the session abstained from the voting, which testifies to an indubitable disconcertedness among the heads of the party at that time. Once again, it's showing that, the liberals are doing anything, beating their chest. Also, very interesting, Trotsky is also pointing out how liberals eventually move to the right, which is why we cannot trust them. Which is why we cannot trust liberals, because eventually they become fascists. As we saw in the last election in 2024, Kamala Harris was standing on stage talking about, I keep a Glock in my pants and I'm ready to bomb Iran too. You get what I'm saying? So yeah, the liberals are eventually moving towards their eventual end goal, fascism, because that's what nationalism, that's what the idea of a strong state ends up becoming. It necessitates fascism, all right? So, Reina PCB says, I already consider liberals more right-wing. That's absolutely true. But tell me, what do you think us leftists, us communists, us socialists should do to communicate to people that liberalism eventually leads to fascism? It eventually leads to counter-revolution. Tell us. That is a good question that I ask the audience. How should us communists, socialists, leftists in general, even the anarchists, how should we communicate to people that the liberals eventually necessitate fascism in their ideology and outlook? Continuing here, Trotsky says, mass movements, even when shattered, never failed to leave their traces. The place of the titled nobleman at the head of the government was now occupied by a radical lawyer. The Ministry of the Interior was occupied by a former hard labor convict. The plebeian transformation of the government was at hand. Kerensky, Setserelli, Chernov, Skobelev, leaders of the executive committee now determined the physiognomy of the government. Was not this a realization of the slogan of the June days, down with the 10-minister capitalist? No, this was only an exposure of its inadequacy. The minister Democrats took the power only in order to bring back the minister capitalists. La coalition est morte. Viva la coalition. Okay, the coalition is dead. Long live the coalition, as he says. Okay? All right, we got to send some people out to the gulag. All right? Reina says, I try to exploit the friendly connections I have. People tend to think about what I have to say. That's good. That's good, Reina. I like that answer right here because, yeah, everything starts with just talking to people. And this is why, I do think it's important for us socialists and communists to be in community with other socialists and communists. So this is why I encourage all of us to join our local, PSL, CPUSA, DSA, et cetera, join a local chapter, or even if you're abroad like me, try to find leftists and build community with them. But also, it starts with talking to people who aren't in those groups and letting them understand what our ideas are. We have to raise class consciousness by any means necessary. So that's a very good point. Salute and shout out to Reina for that great comment right here. Continuing here. The comedy is now put on. The solemnly shameful comedy of the disarming of the machine gunners on Palace Square. A series of regiments are disbanded. The soldiers are sent in small detachments to fill up the ranks at the front. 40-year-old men are brought to submission and herded into the trenches. They are all agitators against the regime of Kerenskyism. There are tens of thousands of them, and in the autumn they will accomplish a great work in the trenches. At the same time, the workers are disarmed, although with less success. Under pressure from the generals, we shall see in a minute what forms it took. The death penalty is reintroduced at the front. But on the same day, the 12th of June, a decree is published limiting the sales of land. The belated half measure adopted under the acts of the muzhik, which the muzhiks are the peasants, provokes mockery from the left and grinding of teeth on the right, while forbidding all processions in the streets, a threat to the left. Censorelli warns of the prevalence of unlegalized arrest, an attempt to pull up the reins on the right. In removing the commander-in-chief of the forces of the Petrograd district, Kerensky explains to the left that this is because he broke up with the workers' organizations. To the right, that it is because he was not decisive enough. Once again, Kerensky is a typical Democrat, a typical liberal, trying to please everybody, ends up pleasing nobody. Think of Keir Starmer when you think of Kerensky. Continuing here. The Cossacks became the veritable heroes of bourgeois Petrograd. There were occasions, relates the Cossack officer Grekov, when upon the entrance into a public space, a restaurant for example, or someone in a Cossack uniform, all would stand up and greet the newcomer with applause. The theaters, the moving picture houses, the public gardens instituted a series of benefit evenings for the wounded Cossacks and the families of the slain. The Bureau of the Executive Committee found itself compelled to elect a commission, with Chedzi at the head, to participate in the organization of a public funeral for the warriors fallen while fulfilling their revolutionary duty in the days of July 3rd through the 5th. The compromisers had to drink the cup of humiliation to the dregs. The ceremonial began with a liturgy in the Iskavitsky Cathedral. The pallbearers were Rodzianko, Milyakov, Prince Lvov, and Kerensky, and they marched in procession to the burial place in the Alexander Nevsky Monastery. On the line of march, the militia were not to be seen. Order was preserved by the Cossacks. The day of the funeral was the day of their complete dominion of Petrograd. The workers and soldiers slain by the Cossacks, own brothers of the February martyrs, were buried secretly, as were the martyrs of January 9th under Tsarism. The Kronstadt Executive Committee was ordered by the government, under threat of a blockade of the island, to put Raskolnikov, Rochal, and Ensign Remnev at the disposal of the courts of inquiry. At Helsingfors, left social revolutionaries were for the first time arrested, along with Bolsheviks. The retired Prince Lvov complained in the newspapers that the Soviets are beneath the level of state morals and have not yet cleansed themselves of Leninist, those agents of the Germans. It became a matter of honor with the compromisers to demonstrate their state morals. On July 13th, the Executive Committee in joint session adopted a resolution introduced by Dam. Any person indicted by the courts is deprived of membership in the executive committees until sentence is pronounced. This placed the Bolsheviks, in fact, beyond the law. Kerensky shut down the whole Bolshevik press. In the provinces, the land committees were arrested. Izvestia sobbed impotently. Only a few days ago, we witnessed a debauch of anarchy on the streets of Petrograd. Today, on the same streets, there is an unrestrained flow of counter-revolutionary Black Hundred speeches. Okay? We have to send some people to the re-education camp. They gotta go. They gotta go. Okay? Yeah. Once again, man, the forces of reaction are very powerful and strong. So, continuing here. After the disbandment of the more revolutionary regiments and the disarming of the workers, the resultant of the composition of forces moved still farther to the right. A considerable part of the real power was now clearly in the hands of the military chiefs, the industrial and banking and cadet groups. The rest of it remained, as before, in the hands of the Soviets. The dual power was still there, but now no longer the legalized, contractual, or coalitional dual power of the preceding 2 months, but the explosive dual power of a clique, of two cliques, the bourgeois military and the compromisist, who feared but at the same time needed each other. What remained to be done? To resurrect the coalition. After the insurrection of July 3rd through the 5th, says Milikov quite justly, the idea of a coalition not only did not disappear, but acquired for the time being more force and importance than it had possessed before. So once again, this is something that us communists, socialists, leftists in general should be aware of. When reaction hits, it's going to be international, and they are going to be unified. As we are seeing right now with the Trump administration, they are waging a global war against the left. It's no surprise that they sent billions of American dollars to Javier Milei, a man who is ruining Argentina. Argentines are now picking food out of trash cans like they are here in Hungary. It's no coincidence that the Trump administration let a convicted cocaine dealing president of Honduras out of jail to make sure that the left in Honduras would be suppressed. It's no coincidence that they have, U.S. tankers and warships circling Cuba right now. Similar at this time, the right in their reaction, the former liberals who are now full-on fascists now, are making sure that the Bolsheviks and the social revolutionaries outside of the country are getting arrested. They're calling up Finland saying, hey, you got any Bolsheviks over there? Arrest them. You get what I'm saying? So this is what we have to keep in mind. It will be international and they will be unified, just like how we should be. And this is why I said earlier that leftist, communist, socialists should be in community with others. And I don't care if you're in the PSL, the CPUSA, the DSA, any group, get in community with somebody, okay? Because they're unified. They don't care if they're, like we saw on January 6th, there was a Jewish man walking hand in hand with a right-winger holding up the stars and bars, flying it through the Capitol, okay? All right? Think about that. Think about that. A Jewish man walking with a full-on, SS tattoo having Nazi up in the Capitol. Think about that. Okay? So, let's see. So, Raina says she's not interested in phantasms. That's why we got the troll out of here, the Christian troll. There's no problem with Christianity. Just find a live that's talking about Christianity. We're not talking about that. Okay? All right, we're going to put some people in the gulag, all right? And Indian going to the army. Indian going to the army, I don't care. Good luck. Though you shouldn't serve in the army. You shouldn't serve in the army, okay? I don't know what else. Okay, everybody else is good right now. Okay, Raina, shout out to Raina up in the live stream. If anybody wants to be a moderator, or what I call a commissar here, you can become a moderator and have moderating powers. If you want to be a moderator, say yes. Say yes. If you want to be, I will ask you a qualifying question to make sure you are capable of having this immense power to send people to the re-education camp or the gulag. But if you want to be a moderator to make sure I can read the book on time and give commentary on the text and pose questions to the book club here that is meeting, let me know, because I do need help. I need help to make sure the trolls, white supremacists, fascists are all kicked out. But so if you want to be a moderator, please say yes, and I'll ask you a question. All right? So, Raina says that she's not sure if we align. I don't care if we align. All you need to do is hate fascism and hate racism, okay? All right? 88. Yeah, anybody with 88 in here is getting blocked instantly. Instantly. You got 88 in your name? No. None of that. None of that. No fascism. No coded racism. No Nazism. None of that. Okay? Continuing here. So the Provisional Committee of the State Duma unexpectedly came to life at this time and adopted a drastic resolution against the government of Salvation. That was the last straw. All the ministers handed their portfolios to Kerensky, thereby making him the focus of the national sovereignty. In the further development of the February Revolution, as also in the personal fate of Kerensky, that moment acquired an important significance. In the chaos of groupings, resignations, and appointments, something in the nature of an immovable point had been designated around which everything else revolved. The resignation of the ministers served only as an introduction to negotiations with the cadets and industrialists. The cadets laid down their conditions: responsibility of the members of the government exclusively to their own conscience, complete unity with the Allies, restoration of discipline in the army, no social reforms until the Constituent Assembly. A point not written down was the demand that the elections to the Constituent Assembly be postponed. This was called a non-party and national program. A similar program was advanced by the representatives of trade and industry, whom the compromisers had tried vainly to set against the cadets. The Executive Committee again confirmed its resolution endowing the government of salvation with unlimited powers. That meant agreeing to the government's independence of the Soviets. On the same day, Tsetserelli, as Minister of the Interior, sent out instructions for the taking of swift and decisive measures, putting an end to all illegal activities in the matter of land relations. The Minister of Food Supply, Peshakonov, likewise demanded an end of all violent and criminal manifestations against the landlords. The government of the salvation of the revolution recommended itself above all as a government of the salvation of the landlord's property. But not that alone. An industrial magnate, the engineer Palchinsky, in his threefold calling as director of the Ministry of Trade and Industry, plenipotentiary administrator of fuel and metal, and head of the Commission of Defense, was conducting an energetic campaign for syndicated capital. The Menshevik economist Cheravanin complained in the economic department of the Soviet that the noble undertakings of the democracy were going to smash against the sabotage of Palchinsky. The Minister of Agriculture, Chernov, to whose shoulders the cadet had shifted the accusation of German connections, felt obliged, for purposes of rehabilitation, to resign. On July 18th, the government, in which socialists predominated, issued a decree dissolving the unsubmissive Finnish Sejm with its socialist majority. I think what he means by Finnish Sejm, he's talking about the Sami, okay? I think he's talking about the Sami, who are the indigenous people of Scandinavia, or northern Scandinavia. But I digress. Anyway, in a solemn note to the Allies on the third anniversary of the World War, the government not only repeated the ritual oath of loyalty, but also reported the happy putting down of an insurrection caused by agents of the enemy, a priceless documentary record of bootlicking. At the same time, a fierce law was promulgated against transgressions of discipline on the railroads. After the government had thus demonstrated its statesmanly maturity, Kerensky finally made up his mind to answer the ultimatum of the Cadet Party. His answer was to the effect that the demands presented by it could not serve as an obstacle to his participation in the provisional government. This veiled capitulation was, however, not enough for the liberals. They had to bring the compromisers to their knees. The Central Committee of the Cadet Party declared that the governmental declaration issued after the breakup of the coalition on July 8th, a collection of democratic commonplaces, was unacceptable to them and broke off the negotiations. All right, very interesting. So once again, for people out here who say all the time that, we should vote for Democrats because, it will be easier to, protest against Democrats, rally the Democrats, etc. This is what happens when you have Democrats in power. You get what I'm saying? All right. So Reina says that, what times do you normally stream? I might be able to mod. I'm here in Budapest, Hungary. So, my streaming times are anywhere between 10 a.m. to about 12 p.m. So it's a wide range. I come on live, pretty often. Almost every day I'm on live. So listen, I understand that everybody's busy and that other people have jobs and other things to do. It's just, it would be helpful if you came in anytime that you drop by to moderate, to make sure that we get white supremacists and trolls out of here. You get what I'm saying? See how easy that is? Anyway, like I was saying, this is what happens when you put liberals, Democrats in power, because they have now gotten to the point where they are now actively fighting against any sort of reform or revolution to this system that the Soviets are trying to put in place in Russia. Okay? Anyway, continuing here. It was a concentrated attack. The cadets were acting in close union, not only with the industrialists and allied diplomats, but also with the army generals. The head committee of the League of Officers at headquarters functioned under the de facto leadership of the Cadet Party. Through the high commanding staff, the cadets brought pressure against the compromisers on their most sensitive side. On July 8th, the commander-in-chief of the Southwestern Front, General Kornilov, gave orders to open fire upon retreating soldiers with machine guns and artillery. Supported by the commissar of the front, Savinkov, former head of a terrorist organization of social revolutionaries, Kornilov had before this demanded the introduction of the death penalty at the front, threatening otherwise to resign the command. A secret telegram had immediately appeared in the press. Kornilov was trying to get publicly for himself. The Supreme Commander-in-Chief, Brusilov, more cautious and evasive, wrote to Kerensky in a pedagogical tone, the lessons of the great French Revolution, partially forgotten by us, nevertheless forcibly call themselves to mind. These lessons lay in the fact that the French revolutionists, after vainly trying to reorganize the army upon humane principles, afterward adopted the death penalty, and their triumphal banners filled half the world. This was all that the general had learned from the Book of Revolution. On July 12th, the government restored the death penalty in wartime for certain major crimes committed by men on military duty. However, the commander-in-chief of the Northern Front, General Klembovsky, wrote 3 days later, experience has shown that those military units in which there have been many replacements have become utterly incapable of fighting. An army cannot be healthy if the source of its replacement is rotten. This rotten source of replacements was the Russian people. Absolutely insane that they are now going back into this war. You know, it's incredible how the liberal mind works. When you're committed to this idea of liberalism, committed to this idea of Republican government, etc., it comes to the point where you don't even want to actually hear the people. You feel like you know better than the people. And that's what these people are doing. Milikov, Kerensky, the cadets in general are essentially no different than our Democrats today. Warmongering, all about maintaining law and order, non-democratic practices, just all sorts of wicked shit, okay? We have to make sure we put these white supremacists out of here. We have to make sure we put the white supremacists and trolls out of here, okay? Make sure they get out of here. Once again, if anybody wants to be a commissar, you will be gifted with extreme power to ban people and put them on timeout. Let me know if you want to be a commissar here. Let me know if you want to be a commissar here. I will give you the power, but after 3 qualifying questions. All right, continuing here. On the 16th of July, Kerensky called a conference of the older military chiefs at headquarters with the participation of Tereshchenko and Savinkov. Kornilov was absent. The recoil on his front was in full swing and came to a stand only several days later when the Germans themselves called a halt on the old state frontier. The names of the conferees, Brusilov, Alexeyev, Ruski, Klembovsky, Denikin, Romanovsky, sounded like the last echo of an epoch that was disappearing in the abyss. For 4 months, these high generals had been regarding themselves as half dead. They now came to life, and considering the minister-president an incarnation of the revolution which had so vexed them, spitefully pinched and slapped him with impunity. According to headquarters figures, the army of the Southwestern Front had lost between June 18th and July 6th 656,000 men. Sorry. I read July 6th and the number together. So according to headquarters figures, the army on the Southwestern Front had lost between June 18th and July 6th 56,000 men. An insignificant sacrifice measured by the scale of the war. But 2 revolutions, the February and the October, cost a great deal less. What had the liberals and compromisers got out of the offensive besides death, destruction, and disaster? The social earthquakes of 1917 changed the aspect of 1/6 of the Earth's surface and opened new possibilities before humanity. the cruelties and horrors of revolution, which we have no desire either to soften or deny, do not fall from the sky. They are inseparable from the whole process of historic development. Absolutely sick that these people are willing to let more of their companions die, their countrymen die, for a senseless, brutal war. Absolutely insane. Brusilov made a report on the results of the offensive begun a month before. Complete failure. Its cause lay in the fact that the officers, from the company commander to the commander-in-chief, have no power. How and why they lost it, he did not say. As for future operations, we cannot get ready for them before spring. While insisting, like the rest, upon repressive measures, Klembovsky expressed a doubt whether they could be real. The death penalty, but is it possible to put to death whole divisions? Court-martials? But in that case, half of the army would be in Siberia. The chief of the general staff reported 5 regiments of the Petrograd garrison disbanded, the instigators court-martialed. In all, about 90,000 men will be transferred from Petrograd. This news was received with satisfaction. It did not occur to anybody to ponder the consequences of an evacuation of the Petrograd garrison. All right, Raina jumped into the chat and said, I'll be a commissar. So, Raina, if you want to be a commissar, tell us, what do you think are the 3 essential leftist or Marxist, specifically, texts that everyone should read? Or tell us the 3 Marxist texts that you read that were your favorite. That's it. That's all. If you could answer that question, and we'll be able to tell genuinely if you read anything or if you Googled it, we will, grant you powers to be commissar. Okay? So, shout out to Tommy W. He says, this guy is spitting. Absolutely. But I have a question for you, Tommy, and everybody else up in the live stream. What do you think about how we should communicate to people in the American empire or anywhere in the West, because all of Western Europe and the Western world is behind America's imperial empire, their invasions, their kidnapping of foreign leaders, their bombing of school children in Iran, supplying weapons to Israel to kill the children of Gaza. Okay? I want to ask you, how should we communicate to people that war is essential to liberalism, and war, as it is practiced in America, leads eventually to the war coming back home and fascism coming back home to America? Of course, the right-wingers, the Republicans, the fascists, etc., they love war. They love killing people because Republicans don't give a fuck about other human life. They'll let a woman die on an operating table if her baby died in her stomach because abortion is wrong because Jesus Christ told us so. You get what I'm saying? So how do we, as leftists, communist, socialists, communicate to people that the liberals are as warmongering and bloodthirsty too? Okay? All right, how do we do that? Shout out to Ernesto Garcia. He says, why are bald guys so smart? Oh, well, thank you for the compliment, but I want to ask you that same question. Try to answer. The offer still stands to Raina to answer the question, what are the 3 essential Marxist texts that we should all be reading? Or, and by the way, the 3 Marxist texts have to be not written by Marx. Okay? So you can't say Capital or the Manifesto or the German ideology, right? What are the 3 essential Marxist texts that we should all read that are not written by Marx? Or what are your 3 favorite Marxist texts that have affected you or brought you to the left? Okay? All right, I'm going to continue here. As to the committees, said Alexiev, they must be abolished. Military history extending over thousands of years has created its laws. We tried to violate these laws and we have had a fiasco. This man confused the laws of history with the rules of the drill master. People followed the old banners as sacred things and went to their deaths, boasted Ruski. But to what have the red banners brought us? To the surrenders of armies in whole corps. The decrepit general had forgotten that he himself in August 1915 reported to the Council of Ministers, the contemporary demands of military technique are beyond our powers. In any case, we cannot keep up with the Germans. Klembovsky insisted with spiteful pleasure that the army had not really been ruined by Bolsheviks, but by other persons who had introduced a good-for-nothing military code, persons who do not understand the life and conditions of existence of an army. This was a direct slap at Kerensky. Denikin came down on the ministers more decisively. You have trampled them in the mud, our glorious war banners, and you will lift them again if you have a conscience. And Kerensky, suspected of lacking a conscience, he humbly thanked the military boor for his frankly and justly expressed opinion. And as for the Declaration of Rights of the Soldier, if I had been minister when it was drawn up, the declaration would not have been issued. Who first put down the Siberian sharpshooters? Who first shed blood to bring the disobedient into line? My appointee, my commissar. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Tereshchenko, ingratiated himself with this consoling observation. Our offensive, even though unsuccessful, has increased the confidence in us of the Allies. The confidence of the Allies. Was it not for this that the earth rotated upon its axis? Very interesting. So, Trotsky is just making this point that Russia was just trying to impress the West. And it's very interesting that Trotsky opened this book by arguing that Russia was always a colony. And I don't think that us, who consider ourselves post-colonial thinkers or think about the post-colonial world, consider Russia as a part of post-colonialism or in that sphere. But he's making this argument, he made that argument much earlier, that, Russia was always trailing culturally behind Western Europe. They always wanted to copy Western Europe and started adopting capitalistic ways like Western Europe as well. I think that goes to show, once again, the failure of Trotskyism. Because I'm not a Trotskyist, though I admire Trotsky's mind, his writing, etc., and everything like that. But as we see, Western Europe didn't become socialist, and it didn't try to then rescue, the Russian Revolution, which is essentially what Trotskyism is based on. Western Europe, Europeans have to become socialist or communist for then the whole world to then embrace it, right? That's the fundamental reason why I'm not a Trotskyist. In fact, what we have seen through history is that oppressed people, colonized people, what we call the global South, the non-Western world, embrace socialism to various degrees. Some people created whole states about it. Some people have movements about it. Some people adopted parts of socialist thinking. We see this throughout Asia, throughout Africa, throughout Latin America, where the struggle still continues for people to create a more equitable and better society. And most of these places were formerly colonized. And so, very interesting that Trotsky is making this point here, that these liberals are essentially caught up in, bourgeois Western thinking that, rotted to the core the kingdom of Nicholas II and his whole family, etc., etc. But I digress. Okay? All right. Going to Literat, he says, are you a socialist or communist? I use both interchangeably. To define myself. Okay? Going to the comments. Okay? All right. Aditya Kumar, you got to go in timeout. Timeout for 5 minutes for you. Raina says, I've only read Kropotkin and Stirner. Okay, give us some book titles, though. Give us some book titles. Explain what they are, man. Come on now. Tommy says, I think it's hard to communicate that with current systems, but not impossible. I think it is hard truth for people to accept, but I hope to see the day. And Tommy says, every algorithm works against putting our message, so we must shout it louder. Absolutely. I mean, that's the point of what we're doing. But I do think inherently, Tommy, that a lot of Americans realize that these ceaseless, endless wars we've been in have not been for our benefit. I'm 35 years old. And every year of my life, we have been at war. We just finished the longest war in American history in my lifetime, Afghanistan. Literally, what was it? I was in either the 9th or 10th grade when we entered Afghanistan, and I was on my second marriage when we left Afghanistan. That's how fucking long we were in Afghanistan. I lost a friend to suicide after he served 2 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. And many other people in America share my story of losing people, either while they're there or coming back because we don't give a fuck about the veterans. You know what I'm saying? So war always comes home. And not to mention how many military vets from Iraq, Afghanistan, Iran, Korea came back home and slapped their wives up, killed their kids, you know what I mean? Did mass shootings and shit like that. So yeah, I think we see that the war and this imperialism that America has been doing will be to our own detriment. I do think that's easy to communicate to people. But I do think there is this false belief that the Democrats are less warmongering. We know Republicans are bloodthirsty and they don't give a fuck about human life. You get what I'm saying? But I do think there is this still misconception that the Democrats are somehow the peace party. When Kamala Harris stood on stage and said, I keep a Glock in my purse and I'm ready to murk some Iranians. You get what I'm saying? So absolutely wicked. All right, Suleiman the Indifferent. I noticed in your poll there was nothing that said go Trump. Okay, we got to send Suleiman back to hell. Go back to hell, boy. Okay, we're going to send Waffle Jackson back to hell. Get the hell out of here. Okay. Tommy says, preach, people are waking up. We got to keep ringing the morning alarm. Absolutely. That's what we are doing. Okay. Anybody else? All right. Raina says, Trump, the billionaire shitcoin rug puller, is a revolutionary. Yeah. You can be real revolutionary by having sex with children like Donald Trump. Yeah, that's real revolutionary behavior. You're going against all moral norms and social conventions by having sex with children with your buddy Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah, you're a real revolutionary, Mr. Trump. And anybody who loves Donald Trump, yeah, I'm putting you in that same camp. I don't want you anywhere near a school. I don't want you anywhere near a park with children. I think you should live under a bridge. You know what I'm saying? All right, we're sending all fascists back to hell from whence they came. Okay? So once again, if you want to be a commissar, if you want to be a moderator, so I don't have to slap the white supremacists and fascists, if you want to do it, please put in the chat. Put in the chat right now. Put in the chat right now your 3 essential Marxist texts not written by Marx that you have read, or your 3 favorite leftist books that radicalized you. Okay? All right. So what you have read so far is The Conquest of Bread, The Ego, and Its Own, and Vulture Capitalism, says Raina. I'm not sure what you consider Marxist reading. I consider any critique of capitalism that advocates for socialism Marxist. Okay? So that's my definition, just to keep it absolutely clear. Any critique of capitalism that advocates for socialism and revolutionary change to our societies as Marxist in sense. Okay? All right. We have to send some more people out of here. That's not a black woman. No black woman would be that stupid. I love black women. Okay? All right. So shout out to Scotland and India. But these are questions I still pose to all of you from Scotland or India. In India, there are 2 Marxist parties that have real political power. They have real political power. Tell us, Mr. India, about the 2 Marxist parties. Tell us which one is a revisionist party and which one is actually about that revolutionary life. Shout out to all my Naxalists. Shout out to all the Naxalists out there. I don't think any of them are in the live stream. All right. Have to send more people out to the gulag as well. Okay. And shout out to Scotland as well. How do we feel about Scottish independence? How do we feel about Scottish independence? All right. Continuing here. At the present time, the officers are the sole bulwark of freedom and the revolution, declaimed Klembovsky. The officer is not a bourgeois, explained Brusilov. He is the most real proletarian. General Ruski added, generals also are a proletarian. To abolish the committees, restore power to the old chiefs, drive politics, and that means revolution, out of the army. Such was the program of these proletarians with a general's rank. And Kerensky did not object to the program itself. He was only troubled about the date. As for the proposed measures, he said, I think that even General Denikin would not insist upon their immediate introduction. Those generals were mere drab mediocrities, but they could hardly have failed to say to themselves, that's the kind of language to use with these fellows. As a result of the conference, there was a change in the high command. The compliant and flexible Brusilov, who had replaced the cautious bureaucrat Alexiev, the latter having opposed the offensive, was now removed, and General Kornilov named in his place. The change was variously motivated. To the cadets, they promised that Kornilov would establish iron discipline. They assured the compromisers that Kornilov was a friend in the committees and commissars. Savinkov himself vouched for his Republican sentiments. In answer to his high appointment, the general sent a new ultimatum to the government. He, Kornilov, would accept the appointment only on the following conditions: responsibility only to his own conscience and the people, no interference in the appointments of the high commanding staff, restoration of the death penalty at the rear. The first point created difficulties. Kerensky had started the business of answering to his own conscience and the people, and this particular business does not tolerate competitors. Kornilov's telegram was published in the most widely circulated liberal papers. The cautious politicians of the reaction puckered their noses. Kornilov's ultimatum was merely the ultimatum of the Cadet Party translated into the forthright language of a Cossack general. But Kornilov's calculations were right. The exorbitant demands and impudent tone of his ultimatum delighted all the enemies of the revolution, and above all, the regular officers. Kerensky took fright and wanted to remove Kornilov forthwith, but found no support in his government. In the end, upon the advice of his backers, Kornilov agreed to concede in an oral statement that by responsibility to the people, he meant responsibility to the provisional government. For the rest, the ultimatum was accepted with some slight qualifications. Kornilov became commander-in-chief. At the same time, the military engineer Filonenko was appointed as his commissar, and the former commissar of the Southwestern Front, Savinkov, was made general administrator of the War Ministry. The one was an accidental figure, a parvenu, the other a man with a big revolutionary past. Both of them pure adventurers, ready for anything. Filonenko, at least, was ready for anything, and Savinkov was ready for much. Their close connection with Kornilov, promoters of the swift career of the general, played its role, as we shall see, in the further development of events. And so what we have highlighted here is the fundamental problem of liberalism. Liberalism does not answer to the people. Its primary concern is protecting institutions and the state as it exists. Because the cadets, basically the Democrats of that time, said, we're writing this document that says that people are the ultimate source of power, but the right-wingers, the bourgeoisie, don't like that, of course, because the people just overthrew the bourgeoisie. They just fucking killed the generals, killed their landlords, and now they're taking over the companies. Can you imagine that? So now the bourgeoisie is telling the Democrats, the cadets, essentially, you have to say in writing that the power rests in the provisional government, not in the people. And this is why also we are critical of how people frame democracy in the U.S. We as communists, we as socialists are pro-democratic, but democratic in the truest sense. Right now we have an illusion of democracy in America. You go into the voting booth every 4 years or every few months for a local election, every 2 years or so for your representatives and stuff like that, and think you're making a change by voting in the box for somebody who's gonna fuck you a little bit less. That's not democracy. We want democracy in the workplace. We want democracy for our businesses. We want democracy in relation to our land that we are on, to the material resources under our feet, and also for who represents us. Not this bullshit democracy, fake ephemeral shit that they put in our face and they call it democracy. They call it freedom. Okay, and just like Tommy says, we are not in a democracy in America. We are in the choice of lesser of two evils. Both of them wickedly evil and becoming exceedingly so. So we want to end this American democracy, this Western democracy, and create truer democracy. Okay? Anyway, continuing here. Let's go here. Okay, so we have only a few comments. Literat says, I have been positively interested in communism since 2020. However, I have many doubts about activities of Western activists in this field. Could I tell you about them even if they seem radical? Okay, Literats, go ahead and drop it here, I guess, because I think you're going to argue in good faith. I would always just encourage everybody, don't take what I say as, gospel, or don't take what I say as, the absolute truth. I may look like I'm a seasoned Marxist, like a well-read Marxist. You know what I'm saying? I'm literally learning on live with the people. If you go watch my videos from not even that long ago, like a year ago, I was using terms like brutal authoritarian communism to describe some fucked up event that happened in the past or some fucked up system. I was speaking very bourgeois not that long ago. You know what I'm saying? And it took a lot of reading. It took a lot of reflection. It took a lot of challenging my own ideas, conversations with other people for me to reach this point where I can now proudly say that I'm a communist and I have good arguments for communism and socialism in general. So this is something I'm continuing to develop in my worldview. My whole channel has been about the growth of me as a person. You've seen me travel around. You've seen me get married. You've seen me, review movies. You've seen me talk about my life. You've seen me talk about issues outside. You've seen me read entire books on live stream. What my channel is about is just watching a man grow right in front of your eyes. You know what I'm saying? From the time I was about 27 to now 35, over these past few years, you've seen my development. You've seen the places I've been, the people I've met, the things I've been into, the struggles I've had. That's what my channel has been about from the very start. Okay, so going back here. Okay, who else needs to go? Okay. All right, we have to send people to the re-education camp. We're not here to talk about Carmelo Anthony. All right, Tommy says humble. King, we are all learning. Absolutely. That's why I do the book reacts. This is an open source book club and library. This is where we are here to talk about books and ideas and have intelligent conversations. Okay? Tommy says, I'm still learning too. I want to declare myself a communist, but I'm waiting to educate myself more before signing the title. It's something to earn through action, I believe. Absolutely. I think everybody who is interested in socialism or communism just needs to start with the basics. Because Marx brought us the Communist Manifesto. And it's very short, very easy. Read it in a day. I would suggest reading it twice. It's very accessible, and that's probably what I would say is a great starting place if you haven't read that book before as well. Okay? We have to put some people out of here. All right? Raina says, I got into communism through Jovan Bradley's channel. He is a council communist. Shout out to Jovan Bradley. I watch a lot of his content, and Jovan educated me a lot about trans issues, the arguments for trans people, and how to defend them accurately in debates or conversations with right-wingers or people who are just, unfamiliar with that topic. You get what I'm saying? All right. We have to send Istrax out of here. Okay, no racist allowed. Okay, we have to send some more people out of here as well. All right. So Tommy says democracy means all people have a say, and that is not what we have. Absolutely, that's not what we have. All right. Mr. Good Citizen says he doesn't want democracy. If you don't want democracy, I will give you what you want, and that is to be banished and to not have a voice. Okay. All right. Any other comments before we get back to the text? Okay, I think we cleared out a lot of white supremacists and trolls and racists. Okay, I don't think, okay. All right, that's good, so we're good. All right, let's get back to the text here. All right, the compromisers were surrendering all along the line. Censarelli asserted, the coalition is a union of salvation. In spite of the formal split, negotiations were in full swing behind the scenes. In order to hasten the solution, Kerensky, in obvious agreement with the Kadets, resorted to a purely histrionic measure, a measure that is to say, wholly in the spirit of his general policy, but at the same time useful to his goal. He resigned and left town, abandoning the compromisers to their own desperation. Milikov says on this theme, by his demonstrative departure, he proved to his enemies, rivals, and adherents that however they might look upon his personal qualities, he was indispensable at the present moment, simply because of the political position he occupied. Between the two warring camps, he won the game by giving it away. The compromisers threw themselves upon Comrade Kerensky with suppressed curses and public prayers. Both sides, the Kadets and the Socialists, easily persuaded the headless ministry to abolish itself, empowering Kerensky to form the government anew and at his sole personal discretion. In order to drive out their wits, the already frightened members of the executive committees, the latest news was handed to them of the deteriorating situation at the front. The Germans were driving the Russian troops. The liberals were driving Kerensky. Kerensky was driving the compromisers. The Menshevik and social revolutionary factions were in session all night on July 24th. Wearied out with their own helplessness, the executive committees, by a majority of 147 votes and against 46, with 42 abstaining, unprecedented opposition, finally ratified the turning over of unconditional and unlimited powers to Kerensky. At the Cadet Congress, sitting simultaneously, voices were raised for the overthrow of Kerensky. But Milikov curbed this impatience, suggesting that they limit themselves for the present to bring pressure to bear. This does not mean that Milikov had any illusions about Kerensky, but he saw in him a point of application for the power of the possessing classes. Once having freed the government from the Soviets, it would be no labor to free it from Kerensky. Absolutely amazing that this story sounds very much like Palpatine and Anakin. Milikov is really Emperor Palpatine, running the provisional government, trying to make sure the bourgeois and the landlords stay in power. And Kerensky is sort of this wide-eyed liberal who just sort of fell into the dark side accidentally. So yeah, Milikov and Kerensky are, Palpatine and Vader, but the only difference is that they were Democrats. Their ultimate sin was starting off as liberals, and then they fell into the eventual path of all Jedi, which is to fall into the dark side. You get what I'm saying? Sorry, I just nerded out here. All right. So, Literat says, my main reservations about Western activists stem from the fact that, in my opinion, they have replaced hard theory and class discipline with pure nihilism, a movement that once appealed to the working class, I assume Literat is going to say, now just appeals to people who don't give a fuck about anything and just don't care. Okay? So Iakir says, what do you think is the proper meaning of Marx's concept of the dictatorship of the proletariat? It's very simple. The dictatorship of the proletariat is when the working class are able to decide what happens in society. Right now, we live under a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, or to make it even more simpler, we live under the rulership of billionaires, people that own large industries, people that own rights to the natural resources under our feet. We live under a dictatorship. In every country you go to, I don't care where you are, E.A. Acker. I don't care where you're from, E.A. Acker. Rich people have more power than the working class. I'm in Budapest, Hungary. Rich people run this motherfucker. Okay? That's how Magyar was able to get in power. Magyar was able to get in power because essentially the bourgeois ruling elites here said, you know what, Orban's no longer a good bet. So we're going to go with Magyar, because the economy was going down and several other things as well. Orban was turning Hungary into a pariah state, and being a pariah is not good for business. Ask Cuba, ask Iran, ask North Korea, etc. So the dictatorship of the proletariat is just saying that the working class are deciding how society is run, rather than the Elon Musks, the Jeff Bezos, the Donald Trumps, etc., etc. Okay? All right? So going here. Hello again, the Romani Socialists here, having a good day. Shout out to all of our Romani comrades. Shout out to all of our Romani comrades. Right side up, Penguin. I wish you stayed around because we had a very good conversation about Romaniism or Romani identity in Europe, and I wish you were there to give your input. Okay. SW says America is done when it comes to democracy. Donald J. Trump do what he wants. The citizens are powerless in USA and also gave up. Well, that's the type of nihilism that Literat is talking about. Literat says hardships of the common workers or peasants has become, in the West, a mutual admiration circle focused on superficial identities. I think a big part of the Western nihilism is because of the extreme nature of Western capitalism. That distaste is a uniting factor, so I think it can seem central sometimes. So yeah, Literat, you're talking about, definitely a trend that has pervaded in Western left circles. when we dealt with, the advent of neoliberalism brought on by the Chicago school, the Chicago boys, Reagan, Thatcher, you know what I'm saying? The breaking up of unions, NAFTA, all that type of shit. Yeah, that's going to make a lot of people just be like, fuck this shit. You know what I'm saying? There's a good reason that exists, like you said. But I do think it's different when you're in community. When you're in community with other leftists, then it's not just about identity. It's not just about, flexing on other people that this is who you identify with, or the ideology that you identify with that makes you so cool and different and hip. It's actually about what can we do? You know what I'm saying? What can we do to actually change our society? There's actually a lot of optimism among leftists right now, because we see that, or this is something I disagree with, but some people believe the American empire is falling. I don't think an empire can be described as falling when you're able to, kidnap the presidents of foreign countries and topple other regimes in broad daylight, and then say that, oh, you're losing power. No, in my opinion, the American empire is rolling at full steam, and this is why it's even more important for us to stop it, because it's ramping up its viciousness and its brutality. You get what I'm saying? But some people are saying in leftist circles, the American empire is falling. This is our chance. This is our time. And what we are reading, going back to the book, Trotsky is saying that, the war and the militarism and the declining standards of living in Russia at that time had a lot to do with the Bolsheviks coming to power and the people seizing the means of production. So we are, I do believe that we are living in pre-revolutionary times. The revolution is around the corner. And it's up to us, by any means necessary, to amplify that and raise class consciousness. Because the fascists are doing their work, and we need to be doing much harder work. Okay? All right. This is what I'm saying, man. I need a commissar up in here, because we got, oh my God, we got some strange white supremacists and fascists up in here. All right. Yeah, we have to send some more people to the gulag. Okay. Who else? All right. Anybody else want to go to the gulag? Okay. Okay. Listen, man, I want to give somebody the power to get them out here. Should I let them live? Audience. To the audience out here, should I let them live? Should I let them just be free to talk shit? Is it bad if I'm banning them? I'm glad I have some actual leftists here. Okay, because Tommy, you've been so cool, I'll give you moderator powers. Because you've actually been engaging with the commentary, engaging with people in the chat, being respectful, you have moderator powers. Okay? All right? You can send some people in timeout, I think. So yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So everybody clap for Tommy. Salute Comrade Tommy. Salute Comrade Tommy. Tommy is now a commissar in the People's Republic of Simonia. The People's Republic of Simonia welcomes Tommy W. as a new commissar. Okay? All right. All right. All right. All right. I don't know what Literat is talking about with democratic kombucha. I don't know what that is. Anyway, back to the text. In those days, the gods of the coalition remained athirst. The decree demanding the arrest of Lenin had preceded the formation of the transitional government of July 7th. Now some firm act was needed to signal the resurrection of the coalition. Already on the 13th of July, there had appeared in Maxim Gorky's paper, The Bolshevik Press No Longer Existing, an open letter from Trotsky to the provisional government, which read, "You can have no logical foundation for accepting me from the implications of the decree under which Lenin, Zinoviev, and Kamenev are liable to arrest. So far as concerns the political side of the question, you can have no reason to doubt that I am as implacable an enemy of the general policy of the provisional government as the above named comrades. On the night when the news ministry was created, Trotsky and Lunacharsky were arrested in Petrograd, and Ensign Krylenko, the future Bolshevik commander-in-chief, on the front. The new government, having not borne into the World War a 3-day crisis, had the appearance of a runt. It consisted of second and third-rate figures selected on the basis of a choice between evils. The vice president turned out to be the engineer Nekrasov, a left cadet who was, on February 27th, had proposed that they put down the revolution by turning over the power to one of the Tsarist generals. a writer without party and without personality. Prokopovich, a man who had been dwelling on the borderland between Kadets and Mensheviks, became Minister of Trade and Industry. A former Attorney General, afterward a radical lawyer, Zarudny, son of a liberal minister of Alexander II, was called to the Ministry of Justice. The president of the Executive Committee of the Peasant Soviet, Akvenstev, received the portfolio of the Interior. The Menshevik Skobelev remained Minister of Labor, and the People's Socialist Peshekolfanov became Minister of Provisions. The liberals supplied equally secondary figures, men who played a leading role neither before nor after their appointment. Chernov, somewhat unexpectedly, returned to his post as Minister of Agriculture. In the 4 days between his resignation and this new appointment, he had time to rehabilitate himself. Milikov, in his history, dispassionately remarks that the nature of the relation between Chernov and the German authorities remained unexplained. It is possible, he adds, that the testimony of the Russian intelligence service and the suspicions of Kerensky, Tereshchenko, and others went a little too far in this matter. The reappointment of Chernov to the post of Minister of Agriculture was nothing more than a tribute paid to the prestige of the ruling party of the Social Revolutionaries, in which, by the way, Chernov was steadily losing influence. Finally, Tsetserelli had the foresight to remain outside the ministry. In May, he had thought that he would be useful in the revolution in the staff of the government. Now he intended to be useful to the government in the staff of the Soviet. From this time on, Tsetserelli actually fulfilled the duties of commissar of the bourgeoisie in the system of the Soviets. If the interest of the country should be transgressed by the coalition, he said at a session of the Petrograd Soviet, our duty would be to withdraw our comrades from the government. It was no longer a question then, as Dan had not long ago vouchsafed, of crowding out the liberals after using them up. It was a question of retiring in good season upon finding out that you had been used up. Tsetserelli was preparing a complete surrender of power to the bourgeoisie. So, once again, this is a question to the audience. As we are witnessing here, the liberals, who were the Kadets, basically the equivalents of our Democrats in our timeline, are essentially saying that we are willing to, give up all of our power that the people have been demanding for us to actually reform this society to the bourgeoisie. They were even willing, the left Kadets, the people that were considered radical Kadets or Democrats at that time, think of like an AOC, were even saying that, how about we make one of the generals a fucking dictator in the country to make sure these Soviets don't gain power. Think about that. Think about that. So I have to ask this question once again to the audience. How can we communicate to people that the liberals are no longer to be trusted? I know every 4 years they come to us and say this is the most important election of our lifetime. That these people are gonna, bring back slavery. They're gonna put women back in the kitchen and take away their jobs. They're gonna start killing gay people in the street. That's what they tell us. You know what I'm saying? That's the fear mongering that goes into our mind every time it's a Republican or a Democrat on the ballot. You know what I'm saying? And yes, rightly so. The Republicans are fucking crazy. They're lunatics. They're fascists. They're bloodthirsty maniacs. But how do we communicate to people that the Democrats, the liberals, are just as bad, and that we are post-liberalism now? We are post-liberalism. We want an end to liberalism. We want an end to this bullshit democracy. How do we communicate that to people? Okay? How do we communicate that to people? That liberalism has to go. And that includes the whole thing. That includes the whole thing. The Republicans have to definitely go, and the Democrats can no longer be trusted. How do we communicate this to people? It's very, very important. Okay, I do think this is the comments of our time. Okay, please answer that. Shout out to Tommy with his first victim. Said to put him on a timeout. He sent him to the re-education camp. Everybody salute Comrade Tommy. Commissar Tommy is doing his thing. He's going to get a promotion very quickly. Oh, man. Okay. Oh, shout out to Belfast up in here. Tell us, man, what's happening in the city streets? Tell us what's happening in the city streets. If this guy W says that, I'm happy about what's happening in Belfast. Our local whites are burning the town down. Tommy, you got to ban them. If you have not heard, everybody, there's a pogrom going on. There's a pogrom. They are chasing down brown people, Muslims in Belfast, burning their homes down, threatening their lives, simply because two guys got into a fight at a bar and one of them pulled out a knife and started stabbing him. So that justifies racism and justifies burning down your own city. Make that make sense. The Muslims are coming. They're burning down our towns. So let's do it first before they come. Yeah, stop the boats. Stop the boats. If we burn our city down, then nobody will come on the boats anymore. Think about that, man. All right. So shout out to Literat. He says, I have a lot to say, but it's very hard for me as there is a word limit and I don't speak English normally. We will be having a call-in show via Zoom live. So if you want to join the call-in show and chat it up about anything, you can join the call-in show. All right. So let's continue here. All right. Jim Dandy might have to go. He might have to go to a re-education camp. I think he has to go. I think he is implying that somehow people weren't stabbing each other in the UK 10 years ago. Yes, 10 or 15 years ago in the United Kingdom. Okay? 10 or 15 years ago, nobody in the UK had ever stabbed anybody. Never. That had never happened. Two guys had never gotten into a fight before, ever. Yes, that's absolutely true. Okay? All right. Eacker says, I don't think there's anything wrong with progressivism. You assume it's mutually exclusive because of something that happened during the 1917 revolution. No, I'm talking about what's happening in our lifetime. In our lifetime. In our lifetime, I saw Barack Obama murder a U.S. citizen. In my lifetime, I saw Barack Obama murder a U.S. citizen with a drone strike. So, E.A. Acker, I don't think I'm making comparison to what's happening back in 1917, but I'm also drawing from what we are seeing liberals do in our lifetime. Did we not see Obama drop a drone on a U.S. citizen? Did we not see Obama allow more people to go to Guantanamo Bay? What are you talking about? That's one of the stupidest comments. That does not deserve you getting banned because you've actually asked a very good question. You deserve to be around here, but that's a very fucking stupid comment. I'm talking about the liberals then and the liberals now because it's the same thing, man. That's what I'm talking about. However, we see socialism as many forms, says E.A. Acker. All right? All right. So W says, number of British loyalists burning out immigrants. The people who are doing this don't identify as Irish. They don't identify as Irish. They identify as Irish. The Irish people stand with immigrants and minorities. Shout out to W. All right. Okay. Yes. Okay, they identify as British, not Irish. Shout out to W for being anti-racist. Absolutely. You know, I got a lot of love for Irish people in general, because they share somewhat history with us in the global South, fighting against white supremacy. But whiteness has infected the minds of a lot of Irish people. A book I've been meaning to read is How the Irish Became White. And that's also important to how white supremacy needs to be tackled. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, there are white supremacist, Irish people, but a lot of the Irish are actually pretty good people. Like there are most people, you know what I'm saying? Most people are pretty good, but it takes a lot to be anti-racist. Okay? All right, we have to send Mick Lovin. Mick Lovin, you're on 1 minute timeout. 1 minute timeout. Think about what you said. Think about how stupid you sound. Think about how stupid you sound, and then come back and apologize. Okay? Continuing here. The reaction was on the offensive, the democracy in retreat. Classes and groups which had retired in fright during the first days of the revolution began to lift their heads. Interest, which yesterday had lain concealed, today came into the open. Merchants and speculators demanded the extermination of the Bolsheviks and freedom of trade. They raised their voice against all restrictions upon trade whatsoever, and even those which had been introduced under Tsarism. The food commissions, which had tried to struggle with speculation, were declared to blame for the lack of the necessities of life. From the commissions, hatred was transferred to the Soviets. The Menshevik economist Groman has reported that the campaign of the merchants became especially strong after the events of July 3rd and 4th. The Soviets were held responsible for the defeat, the high cost of living, and nocturnal burglaries. They're just throwing everything at the Bolsheviks. All right? So, Alarmed by monarchist intrigues and fearing some answering exposition from the left. Alarmed by monarchist intrigues and fearing some answering explosion from the left, the government on August 7th sent Nicholas Romanov and his family to Tobolsk. On the following day, the new Bolshevik paper, Worker and Soldier, was suppressed. News was arriving from all sides of the mass arrest of the soldier committees. The Bolsheviks were able to assemble their Congress at the end of July, only semi-legally. Army congresses were forbidden. Congresses were now held by all who had been sitting at home. Landlords, merchants, industrialists, Cossack chiefs, the clergy, the cavaliers of St. George. Their voices sounded alike, distinguished only in the degree of boldness. The indubitable, although not always open, conductor of the symphony was the Cadet Party. At a Congress of Trade and Industry, which early in August assembled about 300 representatives of the most important industrial and stock exchange organizations, the opening speech was made by the textile king Ryabushkinsky, and he did not hide his light under a bushel. The provisional government, he said, possesses only the shadow of power. Actually, a gang of political charlatans are in control. The government is concentrating on taxes, imposing them primarily and cruelly upon the merchant and industrial class. It is expedient to give to these spendthrifts. Would it not be better, in the name of the salvation of the fatherland, to appoint a guardian over the spendthrifts? And then a concluding threat. The bony hand of hunger and national destitution will seize by the throat the friends of the people. That phrase about the bony hand of hunger, generalizing the policy of lockouts, entered from that time forth into the political dictionary of the revolution. It cost the capitalists dear. There was held in Petrograd a Congress of Commissars of the provinces, these agents and of the provisional government, who were supposed to stand like a wall around it, virtually united against it, and under the leadership of their cadet nucleus took in hand the unhappy Minister of the Interior, Akvenstiev. You can't sit down between two chairs. A government ought to govern and not be a puppet. The compromisers defended themselves and protested half-heartedly, fearing lest Bolsheviks overhear their quarrel with their ally. Akvenstiev walked out of the Congress as though he had got burnt. The Social Revolutionary and Menshevik press gradually began to adopt the language of injury and complaint. Unexpected revelations began to appear on its pages. On August 6th, the Social Revolutionary paper, Dielo Naroda, published a letter from a group of left junkers, mailed by them while on the road to the front. They were surprised by the role being played by the junkers. Systematic striking of people in the face, participation in punitive expeditions characterized by executions without trial or investigation at a mere order from the battalion commander. Embittered soldiers have begun to snipe isolated junkers from hiding places. Thus looked the business of restoring health to the army. All right. So, shout out to Tommy once again, making sure all the fascists and MAGA are out of here, allowing me to do commentary on this thing. So, this is related to the text. The bourgeois, the liberals who are now trying to seize back power by pushing out the Soviets, want to continue the war. They want to make sure that Russia stays in the war just to show good face to the allies that they're a part of, and that Russia is still a strong power, etc., etc. You know, how can we also think about the wars that America is waging? Do you really believe that the American empire is crumbling? I am not seeing that. I do not see the American empire crumbling. There are many leftists who are making this argument because they see America lashing out wildly and doing things against their own self-interest, such as trying to dismantle NATO by threatening to invade Greenland, fucking up the whole world's economy by poking the hornet's nest, which is Iran, continuing to commit genocide for no good reason, trying to topple the regimes of Cuba and Venezuela. Does that really look like a empire in decline? You know what I'm saying? I can understand that argument, and this is a departure from the text, because in the book, they want to show that they are still powerful by remaining in the war. Is that similar or dissimilar from what's happening in America right now? Because I think America is really flexing its wickedness and evil through its military adventures that's going on recently. Okay, I'm going to continue here. The reaction was on the offensive. The government in retreat. On August 7th, the most popular Black Hundred agents, partisans of the Rasputin circles and of Jewish pogroms, were liberated from prison. The Bolsheviks remained in the Kresty prison, where a hunger strike of arrested soldiers and sailors was impending. The workers' section of the Petrograd Soviet sent greetings on that day to Trotsky, Lunacharsky, Kollontai, and other prisoners. The industrialists, the commissars of the provinces, the Cossack Congress in Novocherkassk, the patriotic press, the generals, the liberals, everybody thought it would be impossible to hold the elections for the Constituent Assembly in September. Best of all, to postpone them to the end of the war. To this, however, the government would not agree. A compromise was found. The convocation of the Constituent Assembly was deferred to the 28th of November. The Kadets accepted this postponement, although not without grumblings. They were firmly counting on certain decisive events happening during the 3 remaining months, which would shift the whole question of the Constituent Assembly to a different level. These hopes were being more and more openly connected with the name of Kornilov. The reclaim surrounding the figure of this new chief henceforth occupied the center of the bourgeois policy. A biography of the first People's Commander-in-Chief was distributed in enormous quantities with the active cooperation of headquarters. When Savinkov, speaking as General Administrator of the War Ministry, would say to the journalist, "We assume, etc., etc., his "we" did not mean Savinkov and Kerensky, but Savinkov and Kornilov. The noise surrounding the name of Kornilov put Kerensky on his guard. Rumors were spreading more and more persistently about a conspiracy centering in the League of Officers at headquarters. Personal meetings between the heads of the government and the chiefs of the army in the first days of August only fanned the fires of their mutual antipathy. Does that lightweight elocutionist think he can give orders to me? Kornilov doubtless said to himself. Does that dull and ignorant Cossack expect to save Russia? Kerensky could not but think. And they were both right in their way. Kornilov's program, which included the militarization of the factories and railroads, the extension of the death penalty to the rear, and the subordination of the Petrograd military district, and therewith the garrison of the capital to the headquarters, became known in those days to the compromisist circles. Behind this official program, another program, unexpressed but no less actual, could easily be guessed at. The left press surrounded the alarm. The left press sounded the alarm. The executive committee advanced a new candidate for commander-in-chief in the person of General Cheremissov. There was open talk of the impending retirement of Kornilov. The reaction became alarmed. Number one, that I'm very surprised by, is that they were even able to continue to print newspapers. Because the way Trotsky is describing Russia at this time, it sounds almost anarchic. It sounds crazy that the printing presses were even still running. But I digress. All right. E. Acker says there's a confusion between the classical liberalism of the bourgeois in 1917 with modern political neoliberalism here. The two ideologies are not the same. No, they are not the same, of course. We are dealing with neoliberalism right now, which carries inherently the same DNA. I do believe that a lot of that DNA that was passed on from the father of liberalism to the child neoliberalism does exist in what we're witnessing in the text of 1917 Russia and 2026 America and the Western world in general. Okay? All right? So yeah, that's what I think is a bit the same. At the time, the liberals believe in the authority of, elected representatives to maintain the state. The state has to be kept together by any means necessary. Law and order is meant for the protection of private property. You get what I'm saying? All right. Okay, we have a racist up in the chat. IDK, yeah, Tommy, slap him. Slap IDK, you got that. All right, your anger at Obama is because he adopted many neoliberal policies from his predecessor, George Bush. Absolutely, absolutely. The same way I'm mad at people who inherited, white supremacist thinking from their fathers. Now, are the racists of today, are the white supremacists today the same exact white supremacists and racists of the 1960s who were their fathers and grandfathers? No. But does that not mean that they're not still racist? You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that racism is DNA encoded. You know what I'm saying? But it's this cultural things and it's practical things as well. And so from liberalism, we get neoliberalism. And from liberalism, we get this veneration of the state, veneration of law and order, veneration of the protection of private property and privatization, etc., etc. So yes, neoliberalism activated that. I don't think that's, that far away to reach from. You get what I'm saying? Once again, reading this book is supposed to inspire us, but also give us ways of identifying the people that we are dealing with now and the institutions we're dealing with now, etc., etc. Okay? So I get what you're saying, E.A. Acker. You're making a very good point. But the classical liberalism of 1917 Russia wasn't even classical liberalism. You get what I'm saying? The classical liberalism, had not ever existed, I think, until had existed up until like the middle of the, let's say, the 18th century, etc., etc. It was always being developed. I don't think that we could say that there is a hard delineation. I think classical liberalism, honestly, if we interrogate this, is as fanciful, as fantastic as saying that there is Western civilization. Liberalism does exist the same way Marxism exists, but it continues to evolve and change over time. Putting this hard line that there's classical liberalism is saying that there's like such a thing as classical Marxism. This is an invention, I would say. Okay? Okay, now we're talking about racism, but that's a totally different topic. I think just sticking to ideologies and not racism, because that's a much deeper topic. I would say that, once again, this is my thesis. Classical liberalism is as real as Western civilization is. If you take it that there is such a thing as the Western tradition or Western civilization, then that is a type of, fanciful thinking. You know what I mean? We would look at the ancient Greeks or ancient Romans as almost non-Western by comparison. You know what I mean? The Spartans used to think that a man was not a man until he had sex with a man. You know what I'm saying? All right. The live call-in shows are on Zoom, not Teams. Okay? And Tommy says there are ideologies that perpetuate racism. Absolutely. Web Metric says, do you like Trotsky? I like Trotsky, though I don't consider myself a Trotskyist. Very good question. Okay. So let's go here. On the 6th of August, the Council of the Union of 12 Cossack armies, the Don, the Kuban, the Tiver, etc., passed a resolution not without help from Savinkov to bring it loudly and forcibly to the attention of the government and the people that they would not be responsible for the behavior of Cossack troops at the front or rear in case of removal of the hero chief, General Kornilov. A conference of the League of Cavaliers of St. George even more forcibly threatened the government. If Kornilov was removed, the League would immediately issue a war cry to all the Knights of St. George, summoning them to united action with the Cossacks. Not one of the generals protested against this active insubordination, and the press of the existing order printed with delight the resolution which contained the threat of civil war. The head committee of the League of Officers of the Army and Fleet sent out telegrams in which it placed all its hopes in our dear leader, General Kornilov, and summoned all honest people to express their confidence in him. A conference of public men of the right camp, sitting in Moscow during those days, sent Kornilov a telegram in which it joined its voice with those of the officers, the Georgian Cavalier and the Cossacks, all thinking Russia looks with hope and confidence to you. It would be impossible to speak more clearly. The conference was attended by industrialists and bankers like Ryabushkinsky and Tretiakov, generals Alexeyev and Brusilov, representatives of the clergy, professors, and leaders of the Cadet Party, with Milikov at their head. In the character of a smokescreen, representatives were present from a semi-fictitious peasant union designed to give the cadets some support among the peasant leaders. In the president's chair loomed the monumental figure of Rodzianko, offering public thanks to the delegation of a Cossack regiment for putting down the Bolsheviks. The candidacy of Kornilov for the role of savior of the country was thus openly advanced by the most authoritative representatives of the possessing and educated classes of Russia. All right? So W says, I'd like to hear your thoughts on Che Guevara. I love Che Guevara. We love Comrade Che. In fact, I plan on reading Vencemos. My Spanish is horrible. Anyway, it's the book called Forward, and it's a collection of Che Guevara's writings. I plan on reading that It's a long book, just like Trotsky's, but I love Shay. We love Shay. We love Shay on this channel. I will tolerate no slander of Comrade Shay. He is one of the best of us. He is a role model for us on how to conduct ourselves as communists and also as revolutionaries. Shay is a role model for me. Love Shay. Love Shay. X Stone says we will win. Absolutely, we will win if you're on this side. X Stone Monkey, if you're on that other side, you're going to lose. Anyway. After these preparations, the High Command-in-Chief appeared for a second time at the War Ministry for negotiations as to his program for the salvation of the country. Upon his arrival in Petrograd, says his Chief of Staff, General Lukomsky, describing this visit of Kornilov, he went to the Winter Palace escorted by Tekinsky with 2 machine guns. These machine guns were taken from the automobile after General Kornilov entered the Winter Palace, and the Tekinsky stood guard at the palace gate in order, in case of need, to come to the aid of the Commander-in-Chief. It was assumed that the Commander-in-Chief might require military aid against the Minister-President. The machine guns of the Tekinsky were machine guns of the bourgeois aimed at the compromisers who kept getting under their feet. Such was the position of this government of salvation, so independent of the Soviets. Shortly after Kornilov's visit, a member of the provisional government, Kokoshkin, announced to Kerensky that the cadets would resign if Kornilov's program is not accepted today. Although without the machine guns, the cadets were now talking to the government in the same ultimatum language as Kornilov, and that was a help. The provisional government hastened to examine the report of the Supreme Commander and to recognize in principle the possibility of adopting the measures proposed by him, including the restoration of the death penalty at the rear. Okay? W says, I was going to say there are some people who try to say he's racist, just like any white man of his time. Shay said some things that we would consider bigoted. The same way that people tell us to love George Washington, even though he owned people, I will never denigrate people who put their lives on the line to liberate African people in the Congo like Che Guevara. The same people who tell us that Che Guevara was some type of racist, Marx was a racist, Lenin was a racist, Trotsky was a racist, are the same people who tell us Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson are who we should admire when they literally had sex with black children. Fuck those crackers. Okay? Sure, Shay said the N-word one time. Marx said this one time. But y'all tell us to admire slave owners. Okay? Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. Okay? And I'm not talking about you, W, in particular. I'm talking about, basically people who argue this. People who argue that we should somehow, disregard Che, disregard Marx, because they were white men of their time. When they give so much leeway to literal slave owners. This is a very touchy subject for me. I will start yelling at the fucking clouds about this. Okay? G Prep asks a black communist, what do you think about racism? Okay. Racism bad. Okay? Okay? Racism bad. Okay? Mm-hmm. All right. All right. What else? Tommy says George Washington is burning somewhere. Okay? Kirkham Down Stalin is up in the joint. Okay. Marx called a dude the N-word in response to him saying he should prostitute out his kids. That's hilarious. Hey, low-key, that's a funny way. But that was an insult back then for white men. Well, you're a yeah, Marx was a white man of his time. You know what I'm saying? So, fuck it. He might have said the N-word. Okay. So we're just going to disregard the idea that people should liberate themselves from slavery. And then we should venerate slave owners. I'm sorry. I got absolutely triggered. Okay? I got absolutely triggered. EA Acker says, what do you think about Nordic socialism? That is highly regulated market in a social democracy, the type we see in Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. I think Nordic socialism is a bit overrated. As we see, capital still has a lot of influence in the Nordic system. And, it's just they put a bigger Band-Aid over the problem of capitalism. Eventually, the public services will degrade. Eventually, the people's standard of living will continue to decrease. Eventually, the capitalists will try to extort more and more surplus value out of the workers in the Nordic system. So no, the Nordic system is not the solution. The only solution is not, Nordic socialism. It's not democratic. The only solution is communism, okay? We have to face the hard fucking truth. The only solution to this problem is communism, okay? And getting there. All right. Counter-revolution, the hipsters of revolution. I'm just now seeing Kirkham down Stalin's comment here. I'm giving that an LMAO. All right. And yes, Kirkham down Stalin says the Nordic system causes underdevelopment in the third world. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. Because, Norway, Sweden, Finland, all these countries still exploit resources from the global south. So, we cannot be free until all of us are free. Okay? Okay. All right. Yeah, we have to send some more people. Okay. I don't know. All right. Listen, I now give duties to my top commissars. We have Kirkham down Stalin up in this thing. He is a OG commissar. Full powers to him. We also have Tommy up in this thing. Yeah, send people to the gulag. Send people to the re-education camp. Do as you wish, okay? The Nordic model, in my opinion, once again, just to conclude, is not sufficient. But what do you all think? If you disagree, what do you think? What do you think about the Nordic socialist model? Is that what we should do? Okay. Anyway. All right. In this mobilization of the forces of reaction, there was naturally included the All-Russian Council of Churches, which had for its official aim to complete the emancipation of the Orthodox Church from bureaucratic activities, but whose real aim was to protect it from the revolution. With the overthrow of the monarchy, the Church had been deprived of its official head. Its relation to the state, which had been its defense and protector from time immemorial, was now left hanging in the air. To be sure, the Holy Synod, in an epistle of March 9th, had hastened to extend its blessings to the accomplished revolution and summon the people to place their trust in the provisional government. However, the future contained a menace. The government had kept silent on the church question as on all others. The clergy were completely at a loss. Occasionally, from some far-off region, from the city of Verney on the borders of China, a telegram would come from a local cleric assuring Prince Lvov that his policy fully corresponded to the testament of the evangelist. Although thus tuning in on the revolution, the church had not dared to interfere in events. This was plainest of all at the front, where the influence of the clergy had evaporated along with the discipline of fear. Denikin acknowledges this. Whereas the officers' corps did for a long time fight for its military authority and power to command, the voice of the pastors was silent from the first days of the revolution, and their every participation in the life of the soldiers came to an end. The congresses of the clergy at headquarters and in the staffs of the army went by without leaving a trace. The Council of Churches, although primarily a caste affair of the clergy itself, and especially of its upper tiers, nevertheless did not remain confined within the limits of the church bureaucracy. Liberal society tried with might and main to get hold of it. The Cadet Party, having found no political roots among the people, fancied that a reformed church might serve as a transmitting mechanism between it and the masses. In the preparations for the meeting of the council, an active role was played side by side with princes of the church, and even ahead of them, by temporal politicians of various tints, such as Prince Trotsky, Count of Olosiviv, Rodzianko, Samarin, and by liberal professors and writers. The Cadet Party tried in vain to create around the council an atmosphere of church reform, stepping softly the while, lest some incautious motion might shake down the whole rotting structure. Not a word was said about the separation of church and state, either among the clergy or among the temporal reformers. The princes of the church were naturally inclined to weaken the control of the state over their inner affairs, but at the same time they desired that the state should not only guarantee their privileged situation, their lands and income, but also continue to carry the lion's share of their expenses. In their turn, the liberal bourgeoisie were willing to guarantee to the Orthodox Church a continuance of its dominant position, but on the condition that it learned to serve the interests of the ruling class among the masses in the new style. All right, so what Trotsky is pointing out here is that the church during the Russian Revolution of 1917, before October, they were sort of like on the fence. They saw that the secularist world outside was going to war with itself, and they sort of stayed out of it. But now the government is trying to co-opt the church in exchange for allowing the church to have some sort of like autonomy and freedom and to protect their private property. And I believe that this was a mistake of the Bolsheviks, the social revolutionaries, all of the leftists at that time, to allow the church to sort of feel like its only hope was protection by the state. What do you all think? We have some very smart people here. Should us leftists, a lot of us are atheists, a lot of us left religion because we grew up with parents that forced it down our throat, or we just realized it's stupid, right? I believe in God. I am not a religious man, but I believe in God. Should we, court the church, the mosque, the synagogue to be on our side? Sure, we also need to combat this idea that we are godless, atheist, communists, because not all communists are atheists. Like me, I am not an atheist or an agnostic. I am a full-on believer in God. Yes, we acknowledge that religion can be the opiate of the people. Yes, religion can be a way to suppress the minds of the masses and stop them from having class consciousness. Yes, we know that it can be used as a tactic to divide the working class by the bourgeoisie. But should we court the church? Should we court the church? Because once again, I've made the argument, and a lot of you disagree with me on this, that we should be trying to propagandize to police and soldiers. If we're going to be propagandizing to, Bob on the force and Arnold in the army, then also should we not court Peter in the pew? What do you think? All right. Let's go here. Is there any way else? All right. Have you read much of James Connolly? I don't remember James Connolly, though that name sounds familiar. Okay. Tatum says, I don't want to take it as an insult. I don't take anything as an insult unless you are doing racial slurs. Then we take it as an insult and we clap back accordingly. Okay. Lucan, after discovering the worlds of communism. Who the hell is Lucan? I don't watch anime, guys. I'm much older than you all. If y'all are watching anime, I am not tuned in. Okay. All right. Bro's trying to make Viltrum communists, and I'm all for it. I mean, if we had Viltrumites that were communists, maybe we would have had socialism a long time ago. Okay. Overthrow Thrag. Let's go. Okay. I think there's a danger of places like China becoming more fascist in nature. This is because of the power of the large corporations and collusion of the class with the Chinese Communist Party. There's a lot to talk about with China, and I do not have the time. I actually am going to be late for work. Tommy says, down with the empire. Free Fire says, hi, commentator. Future Millionaire says, where did you get that? I don't know what you're talking about. I think that's a good point to address EAcker. I will allow our host to reply. I don't know what EA Ackers... yeah, he's talking about China. I can't address China. Okay. All right, he can address complex topics far quicker than I am, much more succinctly. Thank you, Tommy. That's what I've been trying to master over this time. As I've been reading text and replying to comments, that's what I've been trying to do. Sorry, AS77787. I don't know who that is. Okay. All right. Of course, there should be a successful communist state could not exist without members in the military, police, and church, says W. Don't be late for work, man. I know I shouldn't. Are you a judge? Says Claudio Rodriguez. Okay, we only have one more page to go. I'm reading this last page and then I'm out of here. Thank you so much to everybody who's joined the live stream. Reading one last page and then we're shutting down the live, okay? And don't worry about me, being late for work. I work from my phone. Literally, I teach English classes and literally can talk to people on my phone. Okay? So, let's continue here. Okay. But just here, the chief difficulties began. Denikin himself remarks with sorrow that the Russian Revolution did not create one single popular religious movement worth remarking upon. It would be truer to say that in proportion as new layers of the people were drawn into the revolution, they almost automatically turned their backs on the church, even where they had formerly been attached to it. In the country, individual priests may still have had some personal influence, dependent upon their behavior in regard to the land question. In the cities, it occurred to nobody, either among the workers or the petty bourgeoisie, to turn to the clergy for the solution of any problem raised by the revolution. The preparations for the Council of Churches were met with complete indifference by the people. the interest and passions of the masses were finding their expression in socialist slogans, not in theological text. Belated Russia enacted her history in an abridged edition. She found herself obliged to step over not only the epoch of the Reformation, but that of the bourgeois parliamentarism as well. Although planned for the months of the flood tide of the revolution, the church council took place during the weeks of its ebb. This still further thickened its reactionary coloring. The constitution of the council, the circle of problems it touched upon, even the ceremony of its opening, all testified to radical changes in the attitude of the different classes toward the church. At the divine services in the Upensky Cathedral, side by side with Rodzianko and the Kadets, sat Kerensky and the Akvenstiev. The burgomaster of Moscow, the social revolutionary Rudner, said in his speech of greeting, "So long as the Russian people shall live, the Christian faith will burn in its soul." Only yesterday, those people had considered themselves the direct descendants of the prophet of the Russian Enlightenment, Chernovetsky. The council distributed printed appeals in all directions, prayed for a strong government, denounced the Bolsheviks, and adjured the workers in concert with the Minister of Labor, Skobelev. Laborers, do your work, sparing no efforts, and subject your own needs to the welfare of the fatherland. But the council gave its more special attention to the land question. The metropolitans and bishops were no less frightened and embittered than the landlords by the scope of the peasant movement. Fear for the church and monastery lands had seized hold of their souls more firmly than the question of the democratization of the parish. With threats of the wrath of God and excommunication from the church, the epistles of the council demanded an immediate restoration to the churches, monasteries, parishes, and private proprietors of the land, forest and harvest of which they have been robbed. Here it is appropriate to recall the voice crying in the wilderness. The council dragged along from week to week and arrived at the high points of the labors, the reestablishment of patriarchism, abolished by Peter 200 years before, only after the October Revolution. So once again, this is something very interesting. I will talk about this very briefly. One of the reasons that the right wing is able to court the religious people is not really because they tell them that they're going to defend their religious beliefs, but it's really to protect the private property that many churches or religious groups own. As we see in America, Protestantism is very, very powerful. Protestantism, a lot of it is defined by this idea that work and land ownership brings you closer to God. The more productive you are, that is what's considered a positive trait that God smiles down on. This is a part of, I believe, Calvinism, Lutheranism, and many other strands of Protestant Christianity. It's also tied to the ideas of John Locke. John Locke was Scottish, I believe, a Scottish philosopher who essentially laid the groundwork for the ideology of colonialism. When the white Western European went to America and saw all this land and people were living on it, they had to justify in their minds how colonialism could be done. How can you justify stealing land from people? Locke came up with the idea that essentially, if land is not being worked the same way we work land, which is enclosing land, creating private property, dictating exactly who owns what piece and parcel of land, then that land is not being used. Therefore, it is not productive. And you have every right to take unproductive land and make it productive because God shines down brightly and smilingly on that. So, once again, just going to what Trotsky is saying here, I do think it's important for us to court the church. Because the church should be motivated by higher ideals, the idea that we are here to elevate man. We are here to bring man closer to God and everything else like that. Iman Manifesto says the church is very interested or invested in capitalism. That's what I'm trying to get at too. That's exactly what I'm trying to get at. Last paragraph right here. All right. E.A. Acker says, when you mix politics with religion, you get politics and not religion. Absolutely true. Okay. And Donut says, why you dress like my principal? Because you must learn, in the words of KRS-One. Okay, anyway, last paragraph. At the end of July, the government decided to call a state conference of all classes and social institutions of the country to meet in Moscow in August 13th. Membership in the conference was to be determined by the government itself. In direct contradiction to the results of all democratic elections which had taken place in the country without a single exception, the government took care to make sure in advance that the conference should contain an equal number of representatives from the possessing classes and the people. Only by means of this artificial equilibrium could the government of the salvation of the revolution still hope to save itself. This National Congress did not possess any definite rights, to quote Milikov. The conference received at the most a merely advisory voice. The possessing classes wished to give the people an example of self-abnegation in order afterward the more surely to seize the power as a whole. Officially, the goal of the conference was a rapprochement between the state power and all the organized forces of the country. The press talked about the necessity of solidarity, reconciliation, encouragement, and of raising everybody's spirits. In other words, they did not wish to say, and others were incapable of saying, for just what purpose the conference had been called. Here again, giving things their true name became the task of the Bolsheviks. Okay? All right. Shout out to everybody up in the live stream. We're shutting down the live stream right now. All right. In the horizontal live stream, the poll was, what's the most annoying and false argument against communism? With 1 vote, possibly from Kirkendall Stalin, it's anti-democratic. 100%. Absolutely. That is very annoying when people say communism is anti-democracy. Going to the vertical live stream right here. The vertical stream, with 50 votes, Stalin or Trotsky. Permanent revolution got 20%. Socialism in one country, 26%. And unsure, but fuck Trump and MAGA with 54%. I like those results. I am not mad at those results at all. All right, so shout out to everybody. Shout out to everybody who joined. I want to give a salute to our new commissar, Tommy. Tommy, come and join anytime. You're welcome, always around these parts, okay? You're always welcome around these parts. Shout out to Tommy. Yes, I hope I have a wonderful day. Shout out to Iman Manifesto, E.A. Acker, Kirkendall Stalin, Claudio Rodriguez, W from Ireland or Scotland, I think, I forgot. All right. Everybody else who joined the live stream, I want to give a shout out to everybody, man. Much love to everybody. Salute, salute. All power to the people. All power to the people, and peace.